Hi everybody. We are going to be doing some work in the hoop house today. My tomatoes are long past time to be trellised, and I really need to get doing that before it's too late. I also wanted to go over how we built this hoop house. We watched a lot of videos and did a lot of research into hoop houses and the DIY versions, and even looked at the pre-made ones that you could just buy and put together. And we decided that we were going to build it ourselves because we could do it a lot cheaper. And we have most of it done. We need the plastic put on it yet, and we also need to put a support beam down the middle, so that will be in a second video. So this will be part one, but I'm going to give you a little tour of what we have going on right now. So this is my hoop house. I am so excited to have this. Ever since we moved this far north, I've lost several weeks of growing season, so it's nice to have my tomatoes and my bell peppers in there. As you can see, we did the wood on the ends. There's two 4-foot doors on each side, so that when the plastic is on, we will have some good ventilation just by opening up the doors. And then we'll be able to have the sides rolled up 2 feet up as well on the bottom. We wanted more stability in the hoop house itself, so we did not want to put just plastic on the end. We wanted it to last for a while. So it's just rough sawn cedar, and it actually looks really nice as well, and it's going to weather really nice. Let's go inside. I need to do some weeding in the middle, obviously, but so I have all of my tomatoes in here, and I have San Marzanos on this side, and on the other side I have my Amish paste tomatoes. So they're staggered in rows, and we definitely need to get these trellised. I've never done the trellising system with the rope. I'm hoping that that is not too hard to do, because we're going to do that today, and I need to get all of these guys done. And then there's the back door as well, and all of my bell peppers on this side. There's a couple hot peppers in there just for some, I ran out of space in my beds, but they are looking fabulous. And then if we have time, we're also going to weed today as well. When we bought these cattle panels, our trailer wasn't big enough for them, so we had to borrow a friend's trailer because they're 16 feet long. And our trailer would have handled them if it was about 12, but we didn't want them dragging on the ground. So we borrowed a friend's trailer, and we didn't want to drive all over town to find the right cattle panels at a good price. So we just looked online and found the best price, and then I went there and purchased them. The cattle panels were in the back lot of the store that we went to, and we didn't look at them. We knew what size we wanted and what gauge we wanted, and we just asked for those. We paid for them, and we went outside to pick them up. However, when we got outside, we realized that we probably should have gone and looked at them first. These cattle panels have, you notice they've got some ends sticking out, and they're quite rough. They're not smooth like the one that is on my bean trellis that you can see right on the other side, right into my garden there. That one's really smooth and doesn't have these things sticking out the end right here. So I'm not real happy with those, but we had bought them and got them home and realized it, and it was too late to bring them back. So we made it work, but on the ends as well, we realized we either had to chop them all off with a saw, which would have been a daunting task, or just recess them down into the 2x4, which actually ended up working out pretty good. We just laid the cattle panel on the 2x4 and then marked them out, and Dan drilled a hole down in there, and it actually held the cattle panel on there very well when we were stapling them on. You definitely needed to add some staples on there, but it did work, and we made it work out. However, I'm a little concerned that when we get to the top where the plastic is going to lay on this, that this cattle panel is a little bit rough. So I don't know how that's going to do with the plastic, if it's going to be a little bit abrasive on there or not, but we will find out. You can see on my trellis here that I have my pole beans on, that the ends do not go past the outside, and it's much smoother, and this would have been a nicer quality cattle panel. And then it's smooth on the ends as well, just like this. You don't have the ends, but we made it work. Hopefully it isn't too abrasive on the plastic. But learn from our mistakes and look at the panels prior to purchasing them. So the first thing that we had to do was determine the length of the hoop house. The first thing was to add up the height of the 6 cattle panels that we bought and determine the length, and it came out to just short of 30 feet. Next, we took 8-foot 4x4s and put those approximately 2 feet apart at 2-foot depths so that we can have a 2-foot frame in order to have that ventilation on the bottom of the hoop house. After that, we were able to fold the panels over top of the frame. There's just a 2x4 frame along the top and the bottom of the hoop house. And we're able to fold the panels over 10 feet. 10 feet gave us a good height of the cattle panels at 2 feet off the ground on the frame, and it is approximately 7 feet in the middle of the hoop house itself. After that, we were able to put the ends on the hoop house. Dan built a frame on each end and then was able to take some rough sawn cedar that we had and put those on the ends for a very nice look. There will be a support beam put down the middle just for some added strength for the top of the hoop house. I wasn't there when Dan built the doors, but he built the doors out of the same rough sawn cedar as the sidewalls. It only took me about an hour and a half to trellis all 32 tomato plants. I used one piece of string for 2 plants and just went over the hoop house, through the rungs, and down to the next plant and fastened them with tent stakes. So it's been about a week since we trellised up the tomatoes, and we're going to check on how they're doing. So my tomatoes are doing very well. The strings are all holding up, and it's time to do a little bit more pruning and time to get some more of them tied up because they've grown quite a bit in the last week. And my peppers are quite happy over here as well. And no, I haven't weeded my hoop house yet. We're also going to have a quick tour of my regular garden here. I've had some requests to see what it looks like. So the first thing you see when you come into my garden is a gate. That's so we can shut it. And I also have 2 fences. I have 6 strands of wire on a tall fence. That's about 5.5 feet tall to keep the deer out. And since they like to go right through that, there's also another fence about 2 to 3 feet outside of that that's electric. I just have this D-cell battery electric fencer. It's attached to 2 wires all the way around the garden. And we just gotta make sure that we just keep the weeds down around this perimeter. And having the depth of the 2 fences together has really been beneficial in keeping out the deer. So let's go inside. So first thing you see is my herbs. I've got mint, catnip, parsley. I have some chamomile and some purple cone flowers or echinacea in the bed here. I've already harvested quite a bit of my chamomile and it's currently drying for some tea. And I have some basil in pots. And I have sage. There's some pineapple sage there hidden in the corner there, along with some thyme and lemon thyme. I have a large pot filled with Thai basil. I love curries, so that's a favorite. My dill in the corner there is not doing well at all, but my oregano next to it is doing really well. Mint is obviously invasive since it's escaping its bed. I've had so much mint this year and I haven't even harvested out of the bed. I've been just picking all the stuff that's coming out of it. And then I've got lavender and bee balm over there. And the bee balm is just starting to flower. It's very pretty. And then I have some chives in a pot in front. And I put rosemary in a pot this year because it never seems to overwinter well here, so I can put it in the greenhouse for wood if I don't harvest all of it this year. So that's growing nicely in that pot right there. And then on the edge here I have some rhubarb. This was originally the edge of the garden here. My compost bin was outside of the garden. And where you see the grapes here is where we stopped the garden. But we quickly realized that this garden wasn't going to be big enough if we wanted to do things like squash and watermelons and stuff that just takes up a lot of room. So we added that all to a second area, which is all back in here. There's my tomatillo fence. I was using a bucket to sit on there to tie those guys up, because if you don't tie up your tomatillos, they get pretty heavy and then they start breaking. Then you lose a plant. Those poor guys have taken a beating this year with the bugs, but I think I finally got them under control. And this garden has kind of been forged out of that type of woods that you see behind the garden. It actually looked a whole lot worse than that when we first started. So we've actually made some pretty good progress. We have some blueberries along the edge there, and then I have a few rows of a few different types of squash, cabbage in the middle, a few more squash varieties. And in front of my wheelbarrow over there, there's a small row of potatoes. I put those there way on the edge of the garden to create a diversion for the Colorado potato beetle that seemed to be enjoying my eggplants and some of my tomatoes. And I read that if you plant a row of potatoes that you just have no intention of harvesting, you can maybe lure them out of your garden. And so that's my hope. And then way in the back there I have some black raspberries, and behind the apple trees, which are being watered by 5 gallons of water every day, which is why there's buckets there. There's a bunch of pumpkins. So everything back there is doing really well. We've had to amend this soil a lot, and we've just done it row by row. It's very acidic. You can tell by some of the ferns there. So we've just been taking small areas at a time, amending the soil, putting lots and lots of lime on this area here. And it's nice to have things be able to spread out just a little bit back there. And I know my garden is weedy. I really thought about waiting until I weeded to do this garden tour, but that's just not reality. If you have a weed-free garden, I'm really proud of you. If I waited until my garden was weed-free, you would never see it. So I definitely need to get in here. So on the edge of my herb garden, the first thing I have here is a large bed of potentially strawberries. I have some rows that are doing really well. I've got some gaps in there, but this is the first year I've planted them. So I'll take all the suckers from the spring and kind of fill in my rows and hopefully have a nice large strawberry patch there. And then I have an entire row of basil and an entire half bed of basil as well. I know that sounds like an incredible amount of basil, but I like to make a lot of spaghetti sauces and use a lot of fresh basil for that, along with my oregano. And I have some large leaf basil in there as well that I use for fresh eating and for sandwiches. Let me tell you, if you've never eaten a BLT and replaced your lettuce on your BLT with a pile of basil, you're missing out. It's fabulous. And then I have a half bed of melons. There's a variety in here. There's some watermelons on the end and some cantaloupe and I think one honeydew in there somewhere. And these beds are all 4 by 16 with the exception of the 2 on the end over there, and those are 12 by 16. I have a large hedgerow of red raspberries that I've been cultivating over the last couple of years along the fence, and some of them need to be thinned out, and my goal is to have that whole fence line full of raspberries. And then there's beets, kohlrabi. It's the first year I've grown that, and some eggplant. And I finally got a handle on the bugs out of the eggplant, I think, so they're finally starting to grow a little bit. I know they're pretty far behind. And there's my carrot bed, which is also full of weeds. And then I got zucchini back in the corner here, a couple different varieties of zucchini. And then this guy popped up here sometime in the summer last year. It's a blackberry bush, and he was small, so I just let him go, and then this year he got a little out of control, so he's gonna go. but I'd like to get the berries off of him this year, and then in the spring when he's still pretty small, I'm gonna move him and all of his little suckers out of my garden and put them in a different spot. And then I have some kale. I grow a lot of kale because I freeze dry it, and I can use it for soups and put it in smoothies. I chop it up really fine. It makes a great mixture for freeze drying. I usually mix the kale with my spinach and the beet tops, the beet greens, and then freeze dry all that together, mix it up, and just put it in a jar, and it makes a great addition to eggs or whatever you want to put it in. And I got some cabbages, a few different kinds. I'm kind of wondering when these guys are going to produce a head, but they seem to be quite far behind the rest of them. And then some more cabbage there. And then these are the tomatoes that I have just staked in my beds. These are more of my cherry and grape tomatoes, the smaller varieties, and a couple of trial type tomatoes that I wanted to try. I know it looks pretty full in there. But there's some purple bumblebee tomatoes, which are like a cherry tomato, and those are really good. Some yellow pear tomatoes, some mountain fresh, and I've got some lychee tomatoes, and those have thorns. Never had a tomato with thorns on them before, and I'm really excited to try this tomato. But those seem to be a very big attractant for bugs, but I think I finally got them out of here. I got green beans over there. They're just starting to flower. There's a couple little beans on there that are about 1 inch long. And then I have a few more tomatoes over here in this bed. And again, these are just a few, I think, mountain fresh and the Amana orange. I've got a lot of these tomatoes in this area here just as trying them for the first time, or they're small enough that I know they're not going to get very big and they can handle being in a bed as opposed to being in the hoop house, because they're going to be producing long before frost. And if you're not keeping a diary for your garden, you should be. A good diary of varieties that you like and varieties that you're trying for the first time. It's a really good way to document whether or not you timed your seeding right in the spring. When did you start your seeds inside? Document all your times, everything that you planted. Even keep your seed packets and keep them in a little pouch, in a notebook, or just in a little file box. And it really is helpful to remember what you liked, what you didn't like. There's been some varieties of tomatoes that I won't grow again. I did not like them, and I've kept them, the seed packets, and documented down which ones I didn't want, so I didn't make the mistake of forgetting that I didn't actually like that type of variety. So you should be keeping a variety. In another example is this year, I started at a certain time that I thought was a good time for my seeds, and it was pretty close, but I think next year I'll start them about 2 to 3 weeks earlier than what I did this year, and I can document when I started them and when our last frost is, which seems to be all over the place lately. This year I didn't get this garden in until June 9. That's when most of my plants went outside and when my seeds went into the garden. So it was quite a late start this year, even for northern Michigan. It's been a late start, but we had really bad weather this spring, and I did not want to lose anything to frost. So I erred on the side of caution, and things stayed in the greenhouse a lot longer than they normally would have. But a garden diary is definitely something that you want to be doing. My hot peppers, I have everything from serranos to a lot of jalapenos. I do a lot of salsa and a lot of like jalapeno jelly and all sorts of different things with jalapenos. So we go through a lot of those. And then also a few new peppers that I'm trying, some really hot ones and some not so hot ones. And then there's a lot of poblanos and cubanelles in there as well. And then I have my cucumbers on this side, and those are on a cattle panel trellis. Last year was the first year that I trellised my cucumbers, and I will never plant them in a spot where they're not trellised again. It made a huge difference in the pollination of my cucumbers, and I actually had beautiful straight cucumbers for the first time, and not little baseballs or cucumbers that just blew up like baseball bats, and they weren't any good because they were bitter. So those are just starting to get up, growing up the trellis now. And then we have some bunching onions and some more varieties of hot peppers. And then dividing the old and the new garden here. We have some grapes. I don't remember if there's 2 or 3 different varieties of the grapes here, but we've just put those on the cattle panels. I had these left over from where I trellised my tomatoes last year, and since I put those all in the hoop house this year, we decided to put some grapes out here. So I don't know how many years it's going to take to get grapes out of these, because I've never grown grapes before, but I'm really excited to have those. And there's more raspberries on the way out. A few more pots of basil. I give a lot of basil away also. My friends love it. It does not go to waste. And then as we're exiting the garden, I have a arbor of pole beans as well. And on one side, I don't remember the names of them, but these are the purple beans, the purple pole beans, and these guys are all the way up to the top already, and that's about just over 6 feet at the arch there. And those guys are really fun to grow. If you have kids that don't like green beans, just because they don't like the thought of vegetables, cook up some purple green beans and watch them turn green, and they are really fun. And for some reason, the water turns fluorescent green when they're done cooking. It's pretty fun. Kids will enjoy it. And then on this side, I just have some regular green pole beans. And these guys are quite a bit further behind. They're only just starting to climb. And the tallest one is probably about 3.5 feet tall right here. And I plant on both sides of my trellis. I got room on both sides, so they go on the inside and the outside. And boy, is that a back saver when you're picking beans. If you have a bad back and you don't like bending over, it's definitely worth just getting one of these cattle panels. And they're just held down with 4 T-posts, just down into the ground, bent over, and just attached to the T-post. And they're quite movable as well. So if I ever needed to get a tractor into this garden area, which is why we have the gate, I can just move this trellis and we can get in there with that. So back into my greenhouse here. This is the reality of what my greenhouse looks after planting season. This is something that's got to be cleaned up this fall when it's not quite so hot in here, but I have my solar dehydrator going in here right now. This thing is wonderful. I have a freeze dryer. It lives at a friend's house because I don't have power here to run it for 24 hours without risking a generator shutting off in the middle of a cycle. And she uses it just as much as I do, so we came to a friendly agreement of she babysits my freeze dryer and gets to use it, and then I just go over and use it whenever I want. But for stuff like my lavender, there's 6 shelves here in this solar dehydrator, and there's zippered pockets, and you can just put things in. I've got a couple layers of lavender that's ready to be pulled out, and some chamomile, and then there's some more lavender on top there. And today I'm going to put some mullein in there so I can make some mullein tea. But this little thing is, you can find them on Amazon. It's just a little solar dehydrator, and it's hanging here in my greenhouse because it's pretty warm. And the zippers and the netting make it so that the bugs don't get in here. And then I've got some lemon balm in the corner there, along with some cilantro that's about ready to bolt. So I'm just gonna let that go to seed, and then those pots will fill up again next year. For some reason, if I leave the cilantro out in the garden, the deer seem to find it, fence or not. So it lives in the greenhouse full time. So that's my garden. I am going to do some weeding today. Definitely need to do some weeding. And I already harvested quite a bit of basil, and I'm going to give some of that away and package some of that up to give away. But I'm going to put some of it in the freezer to get ready for tomato season. And then we're going to tie up some more tomatoes and then do a little bit more pruning in the hoop house. So thanks for joining me on my garden tour today, and hope to see you next time.